Yo guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan, and today we need to talk about this Matthew Tkachuk situation that is just getting worse and worse by the day. With Johnny Gaudreau leaving to the Columbus Blue Jackets, we've seen so much controversy surrounding Tkachuk and his future with the Calgary Flames, with the Flames taking measures to keep him, but ultimately, as of right now, it feels like a trade might be the most likely option for Tkachuk in Calgary. But with this Tkachuk situation, could we actually see a trade? What would it look like? And will the Flames be able to correct this relationship? Will they be able to sign him long term, or will a trade be in the works? Watch till the end for all the latest trade rumors and all the latest news, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed, so if you like trade rumor talk, this channel is the place to be. Now, when it comes to Matthew Tkachuk, there's been tons of talk surrounding him, but let's just go first up to the player itself here. At age 24, again, he's an RFA and will now be going into arbitration with the Calgary Flames, which we'll get into in a second. But at age 24, he's one of the highest profile RFAs, if not the highest profile one, and one of the highest high-profile RFAs that has yet to be signed. I mean, this is a player that's coming up at a 100-point season. In 2022, got 42 goals, 62 assists, 104 points in 82 games, and you've seen his career already. Age 24, 382 points in 431 games, and of course, in this last playoffs, got 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points in 12 games played. But when it comes to Tkachuk, he's one of the best and most dynamic offensive, physical players in the entire NHL, and that edge that he brings is just such a high part of his game. There will be so much interest with Tkachuk, and even though that point scoring will likely go down when he's on a team, or when he's on Calgary or a different team that doesn't have Johnny Gaudreau, at the same time, he's going to be this above a point per game scorer, and with the edge that Tkachuk brings, and if he does get traded, if he does get dealt, it could be one of the biggest trades we see this entire decade. But first things first, here we have the tweet from the Calgary Flames, which was just tweeted out recently, yesterday as I'm recording this, at 5:52 p.m. Central on July 18th, which said this: the Flames have filed for club-elected salary arbitration with Matthew Tkachuk. This provides us the opportunity to continue to work with his representatives towards a contractual resolution while removing the possibility of an offer sheet. Now, when I saw this tweet, the first thing that came to my mind, and it still is the first thing that comes to my mind when I read this, is the fact that the offer sheet was the biggest thing here. For the Flames, it's them filing the salary arbitration, not Matthew Tkachuk, which is usually the other way around. But when it comes to the Flames, they wanted to file this salary arbitration mostly because there was the possibility of an offer sheet. And you see again in that last sentence, a contractual resolution while removing the possibility of an offer sheet. I feel like what happened was, for the Flames, there was some big interest, and there was a team that was close to offer sheeting him these past couple of days, and the Flames elected to just have him and go into arbitration, have that possibility removed from the Matthew Tkachuk case, and give them just a slight sliver of more leverage, even if all the leverage right now is still with Matthew Tkachuk's camp. But it does seem like an offer sheet was close, and that there was a team that was trying to make it happen. Otherwise, for the Flames, it makes a little bit less sense than usual. But this tweet just shows you how finicky this whole situation is, how for the Flames, they have to be the team to go into arbitration and do all these different things, and with Tkachuk being RFA, it also just shows how not close these two sides are at all to a contract, that they have to make sure that an offer sheet does not come. As of right now, even though the Flames did file for arbitration, it does feel like a trade and a move is what's most likely going to happen here. And let me go on to my likes here, because I'm pretty sure I saw a tweet from, Pat Steinberg, who ended up having a little bit of information on this Matthew Tkachuk situation. Of course, Steinberg with the Flames radio host, Sportsnet 960, and he ended up saying this: the more you dive into Calgary's decision to take Matthew Tkachuk to arbitration, it's clear this is a move to buy time, either to sign him long-term or to make a trade. Knowing how rarely this happens with players of Tkachuk's caliber, a trade seems likely. So again, a good breakdown there, that as of right now, it seems the option of a long-term extension is the only way really that Calgary will want to keep him, and especially in Tkachuk's situation, the only way that he wants to stay in Calgary. But even that long-term contract seems like it's less and less likely by the day, and again, a trade for the RFA is the most likely situation now. And with some more evidence on the Tkachuk situation that he will likely be traded, this was an article by Eric Francis of Sportsnet, who, with the title First Gaudreau, Now Tkachuk, another star seems poised to leave the Flames, and I highly recommend you check this article out. But one of the first things he says that less than a week after losing Johnny Gaudreau, the team now very much appears on the brink of having to part with Matthew Tkachuk. That's the most reasonable way to interpret news late Monday that the News have filed to take Tkachuk to salary arbitration, and goes on to say a bunch of different things. But just goes on to say that a trade for Tkachuk is what's most likely going to happen here. And he says this: it's about lifestyle and family. The fact that Calgary is far from his St. Louis roots, is across a border, and is devoid of a modern rink doesn't help the Flames' cause. Neither did Gaudreau's departure. Within the next week or so, this franchise could look dramatically different. Fans can take solace. This is heading towards a resolution one way or another. So we get a little bit of a timeline there that in these next couple weeks, we will get clarification here, whether it's a long-term deal or a trade. It feels like neither of these two camps want to stall this out. Neither of these two camps want to take too long with this situation. And again, for the Flames, it feels like that trade to likely an American team is what's going to happen here, and likely in the next 2 weeks or so. Now, this absolutely sucks for the Calgary Flames, but there are a lot of different options that they could have via trade. And again, it's most likely that we will see a trade involving Tkachuk going back to the States, and there has obviously been some conversation, even that article about the St. Louis Blues potentially being in on him, and I definitely think that will be the case. But I think almost every single American team is going to be in on Tkachuk. As an RFA, his cap hit is going to be interesting to see, but he'll likely be a player that commands upwards of 9.5 on a long-term deal, as he likely should. When you combine the grit, when you combine that soft skill that he has, he could be one of the most valuable players in the entire NHL, considering how valuable players like Tom Wilson are. Guys that can hit, guys that can get under your skin and play so well are going to be some of the most high-profile and highest players to pay, to have to deal for. And even though I think that makes it harder for teams to trade for him, it just makes the interest even more high. Now, I'm going to list 5 different NHL teams that I think are maybe the most likely to go after Matthew Tkachuk and make a trade happen. Let's start off with the first team here, and let's start, of course, with Matthew Tkachuk's hometown team in the St. Louis Blues. Now, we've heard so many reports about Tkachuk wanting to go to St. Louis, the Blues want to make a trade happen, and as of right now, their situation is a little interesting. They got $625K in projected cap space, which obviously won't be enough to sign Tkachuk, so there likely would have to be quite a bit of salary going the other way, but I could potentially see maybe the Calgary Flames wanting to trade for Vladimir Tarasenko, but again, you got that no trade clause, which does make things very iffy for that. But if they do sell him, Tarasenko, with Calgary, I could see that being a player that wants to go there, wants to go to a team like that. And even though without Gaudreau they look a lot worse, they were still a great playoff team this last year. But again, I feel like salary is going to be a huge part of this deal, and they're willing to be a couple of contracts going back to Calgary. I could see Marco Scandella being one of those guys. He has a modified no trade list, 17 no trade list, so maybe that's all the Canadian teams that would erase the Calgary Flames. But I do think with Scandella at 3.275, that's already an overpayment, and that's a player that I think St. Louis definitely needs to get rid of, especially if they're going to want to sign Matthew Tkachuk to a $9 million deal. But to me, I feel like Tarasenko and Scandella are the two players that make the most sense for the Blues to offload. But again, you would need to have a sizable return of actual players going back to Calgary. Let's say it is Tarasenko going back. I think that would factor in, but at the same time, I feel like that would be more so of a cap dump. Even if Tarasenko can still play very, very well, I do think there would have to be maybe a first-round pick on top of that. Maybe the Blues give up their 2023 first. Maybe it's a Tarasenko 2023 first, and maybe another prospect on top of that for Matthew Tkachuk. That could be what the price tag is, and it will be very hefty. Obviously, Calgary still has a bit of leverage here, and they will try to maximize that in this return. Now, moving on to the second team that I think could be on Matthew Tkachuk. Next up, I have the Detroit Red Wings. Now, with their $10.2 million cap hit, or cap space right now, they might not need to unload any big parts of the roster. And although I think on paper, Bertuzzi would be fun, him going to Canada with his current status and everything, if you know what I mean, might be a little bit contentious there. And I don't think that's going to be a part of things. But I do think one player that could be involved in a potential Matthew Tkachuk to Detroit deal is Philip Zadina, who's also an RFA, hasn't gotten signed. He's a right winger, and I think could maybe be in some position to replace Tkachuk's position, at least for the Flames, that they want to give a guy a big opportunity. Zadina is going to be nowhere near Tkachuk's level, but that's the type of young player I think they can try to bring onto that team and try to get the most out of. On top of that, I could see the Red Wings possibly giving up a couple of big prospects there, especially in a Matthew Tkachuk situation. I think definitely a 2023 first would have to be involved in that. As well, on top of a big prospect, I could even see the Calgary Flames wanting to go after a Marco Kasper in a deal like that. So maybe you see Zadina, maybe you see a 2023 first, maybe you see Marco Kasper and like a second on top of that in a Matthew Tkachuk deal. That's kind of what I think the Flames would be wanting, maybe even more than that, potentially on top of things. But I think Marco Kasper is definitely an interesting bet for the Flames, for a team that, although it has some good center depth, Kasper would be a really interesting fit. And I think for Calgary, if they want to get a deal done, Detroit is one of the teams that could give the most futures and the most future assets in return. Now going on to the third potential team to trade for Matthew Tkachuk, this might be the least likely, and the Anaheim Ducks, mostly because, of course, Calgary and Anaheim being in the same division, I don't think the Flames are rushing to trade him within the division, but I feel like Anaheim is the most likely team in the Pacific to have a Matthew Tkachuk deal go down. Obviously, the cap space is a big factor, $30 million of cap space, but on top of that, they have such a unique and refined prospect pool, and they have guys that I think they can afford to lose. Now, I feel like in a Matthew Tkachuk deal, you have to give up a lot. Personally, for me, I feel like the guy that Calgary would target is Mason McTavish, of course, who signed to his ELC for 3 more years, has been such a beast in these past couple of seasons, and the former 3rd overall pick. But that's kind of, I think, the base of what the Ducks would have to give up. Maybe that 3rd overall pick in Mason McTavish. And I feel like after that, it wouldn't be too crazy. Maybe you give up another prospect on top of that, maybe a lesser defensive prospect in the pool, and then maybe a 2nd round pick on top of that, or 2 seconds. But I feel like Mason McTavish would be the big part of a Tkachuk deal, and especially if they're going to trade within the division, the Ducks would have to give up the most. And I feel like McTavish would be the guy they'd heavily target. Obviously, I think they want to get a Zegras or a Drysdale, but I feel like Anaheim might be a little bit more likely to give up a McTavish, specifically with how good Zegras has become. Even though the Ducks don't want to give up McTavish, I feel like that would be the breaking point in a Tkachuk deal. And again, in a Matthew Tkachuk trade, we're going to see a lot of assets back. And even though we have seen a few trades this offseason that have been a little bit underwhelming in terms of the return, specifically the Alex DeBrincat trade, I feel like Matthew Tkachuk is a different situation with just how much he can bring in the overall game. And I think teams will be heavily interested, especially with some of their bigger prospects. Going on to the next team, though, I think will be interested in Matthew Tkachuk. Next up, I have the New Jersey Devils. Now, if they didn't sign Palat, I think this would be maybe the most likely situation. I think them signing Palat makes it a little bit less likely, but they still have so many assets that I think the Flames would absolutely love. For firsts, I mean, they got a great prospect pool already, and I feel like for them, they might need to give up one of their top defensive prospects. It probably will have to be a Simon Nemec, in my opinion. I don't know if whether New Jersey values Simon Nemec or Luke Hughes more, but I feel like one of those guys would be kind of like the Mason McTavish, the baseline of a Matthew Tkachuk deal. And I feel like if you're giving up Simon Nemec, it would be tough for that prospect pool, but I feel like Matthew Tkachuk will bring a lot to the Devils that they don't quite have. That size, that fundamental ability, and that skill alongside players like Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier will be absolutely tantalizing. And even though a Simon Nemec would be a high price tag, I feel like that's another top prospect that Calgary will want. And again, even though the leverage is less right now, I still think at this point they could get one of those top prospects. But hey, maybe if the offseason continues and he's still an RFA, maybe training camp comes along, the Devils might be able to give a lot less than that, but I think right now it would be maybe Simon Nemec and a 2nd round pick on top of that. That's kind of what I'm thinking in a Tkachuk deal. Now going on to the 5th team, though, that I think would be interested in Matthew Tkachuk. Next up, I'm going to go to the New York Rangers. Now the big problem here is the cap at $4.8 million. The Rangers would have to offload quite a bit there to make it work both now and long term, but let's be honest, the Rangers have so many assets, and let's also be honest, I feel like the Rangers have a lot of assets the Flames would want, specifically guys like Kaapo Kakko, Nils Lundqvist. I think the deal starts around those two guys. Kaapo Kakko, Nils Lundqvist, maybe a 2023 1st round pick on top of that, and maybe even another prospect on top of that too, maybe like a Will Cooley or some other defensive prospect too. I feel like the Rangers would probably give a lot more quantity than true quality. I don't know if an Alexi Lafreniere is a part of a deal like that. I don't think he would be, but I feel like Kaapo Kakko, Nils Lundqvist, maybe even a Zach Jones if the Rangers want to go that crazy, and a 1st round pick is kind of what the trade would look like. And I feel like for the Flames, even though you might not get a Mason McTavish, let's say the deal does happen in a long training camp, let's say it does go that far down, I feel like the Rangers offer might be one of the better ones out there, specifically if a guy like Kaapo Kakko, Nils Lundqvist, and other prospects are a part of a deal. But I feel like for the Rangers on that right wing, they need somebody to bring what Tkachuk brings, and he's such a special and interesting player. And I feel like for what New York is building, what they're going with right now, Tkachuk would be such an amazing part of that playoff roster in the future, and would be so good alongside guys like Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy the breakdown, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Let me know in the comments down below. What do you guys see with Mateychuk Tkachuk? Do you see him getting a long-term contract? Where do you see him being traded to? If you do see a deal happening, let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, and make sure you share this video with your friends. The Mateychuk Tkachuk trade rumors out there to anybody you guys know. And yes, if you haven't noticed already, I am pretty sick, so I've been struggling in this video, but try to give you guys the best content I can. And I will see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.